And welcome to the Take a Breather podcast with Stacy Eric and Eric Almeida. We are certified emotional freedom technique practitioners, and on this podcast, we discuss how EFT can improve your mental and physical health by bringing real healing to the body and to the mind, as I combine the two words together. We also have different types of practitioners visit us on the show to tell us about their methods and how they can facilitate deep healing. As always, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, like and subscribe to us on YouTube. That helps the podcast out a ton. And today we have Terry Tucker, who is the founder of Motivational Check and the author of Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Welcome, Terry, to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Eric and Stacy. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So take it away, Stace.
Yeah, so you have such an interesting and varied history, and I would love to for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and share your story with us.
Sure, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version as best as I can. I was born and raised in Chicago. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. You cannot tell this from sitting down, but I am 6'8" tall. I have a brother who's 6'7", who was a pitcher at Notre Dame. And I have another brother who was 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on whatsoever. But my mom, who was like 5'8", was the boss. Didn't matter how big, strong, whatever we were, whatever mom said went. I played college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. And when I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I was all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. And I look back now and think what a knucklehead I was. I didn't know anything about business just because I had this degree. Fortunately, I was able to find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. But unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. In my professional career, as I said, I've been a marketing executive. I've been a hospital administrator, a customer service manager. I was a police officer. And during that time, I was also an undercover narcotics investigator and a SWAT team hostage negotiator. I had my own school security consulting business, was a high school basketball coach. Most recently, I've been a motivational speaker and an author. And for the last 9 years, I consider myself a cancer warrior. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 27 years, and our only child, a daughter, is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is a lieutenant in the newly formed United States Space Force. So there's all kinds of jokes you can make out of that one. So feel free to do so.
Instantaneously, I was going to congratulate you on having a space cadet in your family, and that's a terrible joke.
That's why they call themselves guardians. So people like you cannot do that. So
that's their official title. They're guardians?
They're guardians. Yeah.
Interesting. That's so fascinating.
So
wait, so I don't know how the heck this whole Space Force thing works out. So so she's a guardian. Is that adjacent to an astronaut or not really?
Not really. I mean, it's sort of like, if you're a Marine, you're called a Marine as opposed to a soldier or a sailor. So it's just, they had to come up with a term. And so instead of saying space cadet, they went with guardian. So.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Gosh, there's so many places to start from, but I hate to go right for the
jugular. Go right ahead.
Well,
it doesn't
a little bit. I'm just stuck on. I mean, the fact that not stuck, just interested in the fact that you've had some very much. Your positions are ones of authority. You've got hospital administrator. You've got executive of Wendy's. You've got being a coach is certainly being you're the guy everyone looks to. I'm wondering how you managed taking care of your grandmother and father, you said, who
Correct.
were at the same time as being a high-level executive in a major corporation. That sounds extraordinary and difficult.
I wish I was high level. In all honesty, really my first job with Wendy's, I started out as a marketing trainee and kind of moved up. I was a coordinator and then a supervisor and things like that. And it was kind of, we had this routine down. I would get up in the morning, I'd I'd empty my father's urinal. I'd take a shower, get dressed, go to work. At lunch, I'd come home and get my dad, help him finish dressing, and put him in the car, take him to work, go back to my job. And then at 5 o'clock, go back to pick him up, take him home, get him undressed, put him back to bed. And that way, it was kind of like Groundhog's Day. It was the same thing over and over and over. But I really believe, and something that I kind of learned out of that was that when he was diagnosed, it was stage 4 breast cancer. I mean, and back in the 80s, they had no idea how to treat a man with breast cancer. They thought it was hormonal. They removed his testicles. They were like, here's some chemotherapy. We'll see what happens. But one thing I learned is that despite the fact really he had a death sentence, he lived another 3.5 years. And I think he did that because he had a purpose, because he went to work up to 2 weeks before he died. And so I think having some kind of a purpose, having some reason to continue to go, whether it's your family, whether it's your job, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what the doctors tell you. It really depends on kind of you as to where you're going to go with that.
What did your father do at that
He was
time?
in real estate for McDonald's.
So wait. So
Yeah, there you go.
Things. I didn't know that was such the jobs that exist that I never heard of before.
So he acquired property for McDonald's corporate locations?
He did. He was the national real estate director for McDonald's.
So hold the phone. So he's suffering through breast cancer in the 80s, buying real estate? That's for a major corporation. That's nuts.
Supervising people who were buying real estate. So
yeah. let me just, I worked in real estate very briefly, and I ran from that career path as fast as I could because it is a nightmare, let alone doing that in the 80s, working for a giant corporation as well, and dealing with commercial real estate, which is its own level of nightmare. That's impressive. Holy crap. You come from...
Yeah, it was. I mean, he put the first McDonald's into a major university at Ohio State. Oh. And, something like that had never been done before in their student union and that. So, yeah, I mean, it was a fun time. It was an exciting time. It was kind of the heyday of fast food, if you want to call it that, quick service. They don't like you calling it fast food. They like it more in the quick service realm, but it was amazing, the data that was out there in terms of, who ate what, when, where, why, how, with whom, at what time. I mean, it was amazing the amount of data that those restaurants had at their fingertips.
Which is impressive because by today's standards, it's much easier to collect demographic data because of all the digital infrastructure that exists. But in the 80s, you're talking about the people behind the counter sitting there with a clipboard making notes of things. Like that's a lot of manual entry kind of data collecting. And like even myself, when I was working in hospitality, I had to do some of that a little bit. And that stuff's usually not reliable. And if it is reliable, damn, you're really supervising those employees.
You are. And when I started in field marketing and eventually moved to new product marketing. And literally part of my job was when we were putting in a new product in whatever market it was, say in Indianapolis or something like that, I would actually travel to Indianapolis sort of undercover and go around to all the stores and made sure, did the point of purchase material, was it up in the store? Was, the item displayed on the menu board correctly? Were the people behind the counter suggestively selling it? Things like that. And report back to, yeah, that was all going on. How did the test work out? Or none of that was going on. How did the test work out? So yeah, it was kind of fun in a lot of ways. I was young and, got to travel a lot. So it was fun.
That's awesome. So you had the funness of being a secret shopper, but with the power of getting people in trouble if they didn't do their job.
Exactly.
So how did you transition into becoming a police officer and hostage negotiator? Sounds like a bit of a jump from the executive world.
Well, it was, but you have to understand that my grandfather, my dad's father, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition, during the height of the gangs, Al Capone and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't really know him. He died when I was like 7 years old, but my grandmother, his wife, lived until I was in college. So I got to hear all the stories, and that was my passion. But my dad was absolutely not. My dad had my whole life planned out for me. You're going to go to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to go into business afterward. And I didn't want to do, I wanted to go to college, but I did not want to major in business. I did not enjoy business. I did not enjoy the job at Wendy's. I did not really, I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it. Met a lot of great people and learned a lot, but my passion was law enforcement. But my dad remembered my grandfather was shot in the line of duty, actually with his own gun, not seriously. He was shot in the ankle, but he remembered the stories his mom told about the knock on the door of, Mrs. Stugger, please grab your son. Your husband's been shot. And he's like, absolutely not. You're not doing that. And he was sick at the time. And so I did what every good son did. I waited till my dad passed away before I followed my dreams. And really, law enforcement, being a policeman, was my passion. And I became a rookie police officer at 37 years old. So, I was not a young man when I started that job, but the SWAT team, the hostage negotiation, was I wanted to be part of the best. And, we always used to say that, when people needed help, they called the police. And when the police needed help, they called SWAT. So we trained a lot. It was a lot of good people. We worked real hard. And so I wanted to be part of that. And so I applied and went through all the steps and got to do that.
That's so interesting. So with the SWAT team, did you start off as just the bust the door person, like the frontline SWAT person, before moving up into being the actual negotiator, or did you go jump straight to negotiator? I'm not sure how that works.
No, see, I was actually smart. I did not want to be one of the tactical guys that sat out in the rain and the snow and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, no, I want to be a negotiator, to be in the mobile home with the air conditioning in the bathroom and the food and stuff like that. So no, actually they were two different tracks, so to speak.
Okay.
And I applied for the negotiators. I was smart enough to realize that my body probably couldn't have taken what the tactical guys had to do.
So how long were you doing that?
I was a negotiator for almost 4 years.
Roughly how many incidents did you have to negotiate with?
That's a lot. That's a good question. I honestly don't know. We were not a full-time SWAT team, so and again, I'm going to date myself. We carried pagers. And so, when the pager went off, you called in with your number. And then when you got chosen, you went to the scene. But people, they've seen the movie, The Negotiator, with Samuel L. Jackson. That's not the way it works. We do it as a team. So there may be one person talking to the person, but there's a person sitting right next to them listening and kind of taking notes, and occasionally, on a sticky note saying, here, ask this question. And then there's another group of people that might be talking to the individual's, family or girlfriend or wife or husband or whoever that is, and trying to glean intelligence, information, why is this happening? What's going on? What led up to this, and things like that. So it was really a team effort. And we trained every month, with a psychologist, where we, would put together different scenarios and kind of, what would we do here? How would we do this? I'll never forget this. We had a 15-year-old kid, really. And everything that, we were trained to do was not working on this kid. He would not come out. He would not. And so we kind of put our heads together and we're like, well, what should we do? And finally, one of the guys was like, let's scare him. And so we had literally, everything else we tried didn't work. So it's like, he's 15, let's scare him. So we broke a window and we threw in a flashbang grenade, which, just produces a bright light and a loud noise. It doesn't explode or anything like that. And literally within 15 minutes, he came out. So, sometimes, the science, sometimes the science doesn't work. Sometimes you need to be a parent. It's like, hey, kid, get out. Let's go. And that's really what scaring him did. And it got him out.
That's so fascinating.
Darn that Hollywood. I really do have a picture of a negotiator being the guy on the phone who's, pulling all the strings and managing everything, and not that there was a whole team that's, of course, feeding you information at all times. And there's this constant backup. Of course, that makes more sense. And it's not really anything I knew about at all, or how, of course, deeply steeped you'd have to be in psychology to do that job too.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, I mean, my very first scenario, there was a hostage and the hostage taker, and the hostage is in a room and it's a closed door thing, and we're just practicing, but the hostage is screaming the entire time, help me, get me out, and all that kind of stuff. And here I am knowing nothing. I'm having a great conversation with the hostage, totally ignoring the hostage taker, when in reality, that's what you do. You ignore the hostage and just solely focus on the hostage taker. What do you need? How can we, and there were things that we would never give anything without getting something. So if you wanted a cigarette, we'd give you a cigarette, but you were going to give us a magazine from your gun or something like that. Funny story, and most of these are not funny, but just to be a little lighthearted, one day I was called and I was working that night and I got there pretty quickly. And I talked to the district guys and they're like, he's drunk. He's barricaded himself with his wife and a gun. Okay. So I got on the phone with him and we established a rapport pretty quickly. And I asked him, I said, what would it take you to come out? And he said, give me a beer. I said, if I got you a beer, you would promise me that you would come out. Absolutely. So I gave $5 to one of the district guys. I said, please get out of the store and get a beer. Beer came back. We put the beer on the front porch. And I told him, I said, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it unless you let your wife go and you put the gun down. The wife comes out, he puts the gun down, here he comes, we handcuff him, drink the beer, off to jail he goes. I mean, I kind of wish they were all that easy, but literally that's what he wanted. Give me a beer and I'll come out. Okay. So
that's so funny. He just wanted to be heard and get exactly what he asked for, which is something nice and simple. Just give me a beer and I'll call it off. That's so
exactly.
funny.
But but that's the other thing. We never lied to these people, because there was always the possibility that a year from now or 18 months or 2 years that we were going to negotiate with them again, that we were going to be right back in the same situation. So, I mean, we had a lot of people who are like, I'll come out, but I don't want to go to jail. Okay, well, you're going to go to jail when you come out. So that's not even on the table. Let's talk about some other things that maybe are on the table that we can get you out safely. And, 90% of the time we got people out safely, but 10% of the time it was their decision to decide to take their life. And that's always a tragedy. But, when you look at more than likely the problem that we were dealing with, you think about it, if you're talking to me, you're probably having the worst day of your life. And I didn't cause this problem. And very well, this problem may have been festering for, 10, 20, 30 years. And it was your decision whether you wanted to come out. It was your decision whether or not you wanted to end this. And I did the best I could with great training and great people around me. And that's why I never really lost any sleep over, when a tragedy did occur.
I was wondering if that's part of the training was to avoid things like PTSD and traumatic, having it be a very traumatic experience, that there's some way to be detached a bit from the process, and knowing that it's not being part of a team helps tremendously. I assume too, that it's not my response. I am not Kevin Spacey making everything happen. It's, it's not all my responsibility. And that, as you say, it's as much about the other person putting themselves in this situation in the first place. But it sounds very philosophical and intelligent, but I can see it being difficult to maintain that necessarily every time when you're working with someone who's like that. For all 4 years, you're able to maintain that sense of detachment. It sounds like quite the spiritual practice, if I may say.
I think it's, that profession in and of itself. I mean, you see the worst, you see a lot of helplessness and hopelessness, and you need to be grounded. And, there's a tremendously high incidence of divorce, of alcohol and drug abuse, of suicide amongst, police officers because of the things that we see. So you need to be grounded in some way. And for me, that was, it was the same way that I've kind of gotten through cancer. I talk about the 3 F's: faith, family, and friends. I have a strong faith in God. My family is very important to me. I mean, when I came in from the garage, I just turned it off. I was no longer a policeman. I was dad or a husband or whatever it was. And, I saw a lot of garbage, but my family and my faith and the friends that I had kept me grounded. But I also knew a lot. I mean, I know several cops that took their own lives and several other ones that, needed to go to rehab because they found their outlet in a bottle.
Well, it sounds like exactly what you're talking about, that the kind of motivational speaking you do should be a part of police training, honestly. Developing techniques right away before you even start your job for how are you going to stay grounded? How are you going to stay detached? How are you going to not take it home? How are you, what's in learning the actual skill set necessary? It sounds like you went into it with the skill set already. And so
I think part of that was just being older. I like I said, being 37 years old and not, 21 or something like that. I had some life experience. My father had died, my grandmother died. I'd been through some things that were not pretty. But some of the things you see as a cop, you can't help but feel. I mean, you can't help but say, how horrible. There was a woman who my partner and I dealt with on a Friday night. We had the weekend off. During the weekend, she drowned her kids in the bathtub, and we had just been with her on Friday night, having no idea that was even something that she was entertaining. But again, I can't live your life for you. I have to live my life, and I'll do the best I can and realize that you're a human being and that somewhere somebody loves you, no matter how bad you are or how low you are. I'm still going to try to help you, and I'll do the best I can. But at the end of the day, it's your decision as to how much of that help you want to take from me.
No, there's a lot of wisdom in that, having that as your belief as you're going in to help people in that way. Because, in our field, we don't see the carnage that you see from having done that work, but we still help people put the pieces back together and then hear the stories of said carnage, whether they were the perpetrator or the victim of the carnage of whatever happened. And like, even for people in the mental health field, if they're not careful, they will also succumb to the darkness that they're exposed to. But obviously for a police officer, especially with the hostage negotiation, you are getting the unfiltered version of it, compared to something where in mental health, we're hearing stories of it, which is still just as horrific, but you don't see it like you would. And so having that kind of wisdom, I agree with you. I think I definitely came with age, and then your own difficulties you had in your life, to walk in with that wisdom of like, I'll do everything I can. I'll be honest when I'm capable of being honest to them. And then it's in their hands. If they choose to make terrible choices, I tried to prevent them, and that's the end of it. And it's even people like ourselves in the mental health world, we have to be okay with that too, that like, we do guide people through difficult times, but if someone decides to do something that we think is a terrible idea, we don't have control over their life, just like you didn't. You're just there to be like, hey, like, you've made a lot of bad decisions, and now you can stop and make a good decision, or you can keep going and it'll just get worse. And it's hard to kind of hold on to that belief.
It is, especially when you see it night after night after night after night, and I always, people ask me about that, and I try to put it into perspective, especially today. I mean, it's certainly not a desirable job, but I tell them three things. I said, number one, you're going to make less money than a plumber. Number two, every time you go somewhere, people aren't going to want you there. I mean, it's never good when the police show up. I mean, whether they're giving you a ticket or knocking on your door to tell you to call the hospital because grandmother died or whatever it is, it's never a good, we just don't knock on your door and hand you an FTD bouquet and say, hey, have a nice day. It doesn't happen. And then finally, everybody lies to us. Everybody wants to make their version of what happened be the one you believe, so you'll take the other person to jail instead of them. So, I mean, imagine going to your job every day, making less money than a plumber, having people lie to you every day and realizing that nobody wants you there. You have to go into that job with some type of an altruistic alternative. I want to help my community. I want to make a difference, because under those circumstances, nobody in their right mind, speaking of mental health, nobody in their right mind would want to do that job.
No, for sure. It is literally the worst customer service job I think that exists. it, like you said, it's no one wants you there. Everyone's gonna lie to you. And what was
You make less money than a
and you
plumber.
make less money than a plumber, and plumbers make very good money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had, I worked in customer service for many, many years. Nothing comparable to anything that you're describing. But on the shitty days, I couldn't imagine the shitty days being every day, because I never would have stuck with it. Because I worked in hospitality. Have people lie to me about things? Sure. A lot of it was innocent bullshit and some of it was crazy. And then there were the days where you just wanted to strangle everyone to death because they're driving you crazy. And so if that was every day, yeah, I can sympathize with officers who succumb to drug or alcohol abuse or to mental health problems and things like that. Like being exposed, like being treated with that level of hostility all the time. And then God forbid now, it's so much worse now.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine it. It's such a rough place to be.
And you can never, what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you want to say, you can't.
No.
You have to be a professional. You can't say, hey, jerk, shut the hell up. I mean, you can't say that, because then they'll go down and complain on you. And, the administration will be like, you shouldn't have said that. You're right. But I'm not a robot. I'm not just somebody who goes through the motions. I have feelings. I see things that, especially with kids, when you see dead kids and burned up kids and kids that die in car accidents that, their body's this way, but their head's that way. I mean, you're like, that's horrible. But even more importantly, you see the 13-year-old kid out, I worked in Cincinnati had a curfew. And, you pick up a 13-year-old kid at 3:00 in the morning on a school night, and, you take them home, and you realize home is their 75-year-old grandmother who goes to bed at 8:00 at night. And, dad's in prison and mom is for lack of a better word, a crackhead. You look at that and you say, yeah, that kid doesn't stand a chance. And you feel for that and you want to help, but you do the best you can, and you be professional, and you do your job, and then you move on.
And regrettably, in that particular situation, your job is just to take the kid home.
Yeah.
Your job's not to fix the home, but you still see it and the rough shape there. And like you said, you're still human.
Right.
And then your heart goes out to be like, this kid is trying to climb out of a very deep hole just to get back to baseline of just being a normal person.
Exactly.
So, yeah, Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, so now I'm realizing too, why it didn't occur to me before, that on all the other layers of stress related difficulty with this job, there's the concept of moral injury. We actually talked about it in another podcast, where you're part of a situation that bad things are happening and you can't actually do anything about it. Like that can be traumatizing all by itself. Just knowing you're bringing that kid back to a terrible circumstance and you have no way to actually do anything about it. Like that all by itself is a PTSD inspiring circumstance. Doing that day after day, knowing that you're in so many circumstances, you're kind of a Band-Aid. And
yeah, you're not making a difference. I mean, I started as a reserve police officer in Santa Barbara. And I remember riding with this guy one night. I just started, and I was all altruistic and I'm going to make a difference. And this guy was, a 15-year veteran. And, and I'm like, I asked him that question, do you make a difference out here? Without batting an eye. He's like, absolutely not. So, you're just, it's like your finger in the dike, you stop that little trickle. Well, now there's one over here. Now you got to go over here and try to stop that one. And you do make a difference. You do. There are people out there that make a difference for, and a lot of them you never even know that you do, but you do. But what you see every night is, I always kind of equate it to the 80-20 rule in business. 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. Same things in law enforcement. 80% of the crime is committed by 20% of the people. I mean, 90% of the time, the beat cop, I know exactly who that is. I can tell you where his mother lives. I can tell you where the baby's mama lives. I can tell you, I can tell you all this stuff. Yeah, just by telling me what he looks like. Yeah, I know who that is. Yeah, and then 6 months later, it's the same guy again, and it's the same guy. So it's a never-ending cycle.
But I could see where the faith piece is important for your own peace of mind, because as you said, you don't know, you're scattering the seeds of, of goodwill, or, you put your energy into the system and you don't know where the seeds sprout, or if the seeds sprout, but you having faith that some of them do in fact make a difference with some individuals, whether now or later, and that
Right.
that energy is going into something good, even within a system that's just so deeply difficult.
Flawed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah,
Well,
so
on that high note,
I know. Well, you've had some pretty intense, your experiences are intense. And I don't know what's, so between being a SWAT team negotiator and being a motivational speaker, it sounds like you had your cancer diagnosis. And if we're going to talk about that at all, as far as like just that, that's a thing, right? Going from, so you're an athlete and a, police officer and out on the front lines, and going into a deeply difficult physical major health issue, and to the other side of it. And if we can talk about whatever piece of that you'd like to share with us.
yeah, I guess I can I'll try to encapsulate 9 years in just a few minutes. Is that, here I am, I was a basketball coach at the time, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, and because I was a coach, I was on my feet a lot. I didn't think much of it. Eventually it didn't heal. And I went to a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And, he did put some pads in your shoes kind of stuff. And when that didn't work, he took an x-ray and he's like, I think you got a cyst in here. I can cut it out, no problem. And he did cut it out. He showed it to me. It was just a gelatin sac with some white fat in it. He's like, seen thousands of these, no big deal, but I'll send it off to pathology. And he did. And 2 weeks later, he called me. And like I said, he was a friend. And the more difficulty he was having trying to explain what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until he hit me with, and I will always remember this. And he said, Terry, I've been practicing for 25 years. I've never seen this form of cancer. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, where do we go from here? And fortunately, he said, I think you should go to MD Anderson, which is a cancer center in Houston, probably the best cancer center, if not certainly in the United States, if not on the planet. I know other places would argue with that, but just a tremendous organization. So had 2 surgeries to remove the tumor and all the lymph nodes in my groin. I guess I should back up what kind of cancer I had. I had a very rare form of melanoma, which, most people think of as a spot on our skin or something like that. There's a rarer form that appears on the bottom of your feet or the palms of your hands. And there's even a rarer form of melanoma that appears in your mucous membranes. So in your nose or your mouth, but it's still melanoma. So I have these surgeries. And then I was put on a drug called interferon for almost 5 years. And interferon for me was a horrible, nasty, debilitating drug. And the only way to describe it to you is to basically, we've all had the flu. Imagine having the flu 2 to 3 days every week for 5 years. And that's kind of what I went through until I ended up in the intensive care unit, because the drug became so toxic to my body that I ended up with a fever of 108 degrees, which usually is not compatible with being alive. But I was at a level 1 trauma center, so they were able to stabilize me and get me to the ICU. Stopped the drug. The cancer immediately came back. That was 2017. 2018 had my left foot amputated. 2019 came back again, 2 more surgeries. And then last year, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And then when they started to look into that and test, my entire lower leg was full of cancer. So last April, in the middle of a global pandemic, I had my left leg amputated above the knee, which, like I said, my wife and I have been married for 27 years. It's like, hey, hon, take me to the ER, drop me off, have a nice day. Just sit in the parking lot. The doctor will get with you in a minute. It was the only surgery that day. I should have been in the hospital for a week. My surgeon was like, nope, 48 hours and we're getting you out because of COVID. But he was smart enough. He actually did the surgery at a hospital within the University of Colorado health systems that didn't take COVID patients. So he was like, we're going to do it here and we're going to get you out. And then I also found out I had tumors in my lungs. So I'm undergoing a clinical trial right now for the tumors in my lungs, which is having some success. The tumors have shrunk by about 30%, but my doctor is not, he's not talking cure. He's just talking, we're going to buy you some more time.
Good Lord.
Another uplifting story for you.
Oh my goodness. How devastating, and what a journey, because it's cancer's bad enough. I'm a massage therapist also. I've done hospice massage, and I'm trained in cancer massage. So I've worked with lots of people with cancer, and that your experience is very extreme compared to a lot of people's experience with cancer, certainly. And I imagine that's going to change your worldview a lot to go through an experience like that.
I mean, it does. And again, I go on podcasts and I talk about how I get through this, but I don't want people to think that, there's an S on my chest and I wear a cape. There isn't. I cry, I get down, I get depressed. We all, excuse me. We're all going to experience pain in our lives. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, that's optional. It's what you do with that pain. And I've come to what I call really my 4 truths. And these are, in addition to my faith, the 4 sentences really, and I'll give them to you here in a minute, the 4 sentences that I use to kind of move through this and move my life forward. And so the first one is, you need to control your mind or it will control you. The second one is, you need to embrace the pain and the suffering that we all experience in life and use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual. And this third one, and I just added this, I've been kind of toying with it, and I really think it's important. It's what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one is, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I recently had a nurse who, this clinical trial drug that I'm on kind of beats me up. I'm at the hospital every day for a week. And she came to me and she said, Terry, this thing is kind of kicking your butt. Nobody would think anything less of you if you stop this. And I tried to explain to her the 4 truths, and I tried to explain to her how I lead my life. And I said, my doctor may take me off the study, or I may die on the study, but I'll never quit the study. And I could tell it didn't resonate with her. She didn't quite understand where I was coming from. But I tried to explain to her that, this pain that I have, and I've had certainly over the last 9 years, a lot of pain. Someday the pain's going away. It's going to go away through surgery or through medication, or I may die. But if I quit, I'll always have the pain. The pain will always be with me. So I can't quit this. I can't. It's physically possible to quit. I won't, because it's just not who I am. And I've learned to take this pain, and instead of, our brains are, it's pain, no, we got to get away from it. We got to push it away. We've got to find some way to mitigate that. I wish I knew how, because I would have written a book and be living on an island in Jamaica by now. But I wish I could figure out how this happened. But I've just had enough of this pain that instead of trying to get away from it now, I just embrace it. I just take it. It's like, you know what? All right, you stuck me 15 times today with needles. That's okay. Stick me 15 times more. Take that pain, turn it inside, use it as energy, burn it as fuel, whatever you want to call it, however you want to use it. But instead of running from it, use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual. And that's the only way I can sit here and talk to you about this whole experience and not be nuts, not break down, because I've taken that pain and used it to make me tougher, to make me stronger.
I have to say, your tenacity is beyond impressive, just to keep moving forward as you have been. And you're right. If you could find it, you would be massively wealthy and on a tropical island somewhere if you found a way to train someone to become like that. And it is a rare trait for a human to obtain, but they exist, like yourself. Like, it's the same thing. Like, it's no different than it has a lot of parallels to like what you did in the police force. You would go into the line of fire, into danger. It's very similar with military. It's very similar, with, the medical world, with, with paramedics or with firemen, like you're running into danger when our instincts are screaming, what the hell are you doing? Go the other way. And so it's impressive. And it's so interesting too.
It's not that impressive if you know me, because I am not. I don't. I am not some superhuman person. Like I said, I cry. When Sunday night rolls around and I know I've got a week's worth of treatment coming up. I mean, I'm like, I look at my wife, I don't want to go. I don't want to do this. But I know that's what I say. I know I will. I know I'll get up in the morning at 4 o'clock and I know we'll start this journey. And I will just keep kicking the door down until the door kicks me. And either I'm going to win or I'm going to learn something, and for me, winning would be getting rid of the cancer. That's probably not going to happen, which means now I'm coming to the end of my life and I'm okay with that. I mean, we talked earlier about my passion. My passion was law enforcement. I found my purpose in life and I lived it. So the next step, whatever's beyond death, and I don't want you to come to my house and try to analyze me when I say this, I'm almost excited to see what's out there, to see, I kind of think back of the old Star Trek, it's like, where do you want to go, Captain? Out there. I want to go out there. That's kind of what I want. I want to go out there and see what's out there. And it doesn't scare me because I think I did what I was supposed to do while I was here.
And that's the thing. It's, first off, that was just awesome what you said. But that's the thing too. It, like, something I've said to a lot of my clients and honestly just people in my life is, courage isn't doing something without fear. Courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. And the same with yourself. The tenacity that you live in your life doesn't mean that you don't have those moments where you're like, for the love of God, I don't want to do this anymore, but you still go and do it. Like it's experiencing that natural human reaction of, what the fuck? I don't want this. I don't want to experience this anymore. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm in pain. But then saying, all right, do it again and again and again and again. And it's like, I'm not like, and not letting it defeat you. And there aren't so I agree with you that you are very much a normal human being, but at the same time, you have a rare thread of humanity where you still say, give me more, and I will keep going until I'm dead or I defeat this. And that there is no third option of, I'm going to stop. And that's impressive.
But I think everybody has that. I don't think I'm unique in that. I mean, I know you both treat people, but I think everybody, it's kind of like you said, give me more, give me more. I think you get to the point where give me more instead of being, I don't want this anymore, is, yeah, bring it on. I'll take it.
And I will agree with you that every human being is capable of that, but very few achieve it. And that's the difference. You've achieved living in that tenacity, while other people may not, or may be working towards it or never achieve it at all. And
yeah, I think a lot of people just, they hear the word cancer. I'm scared. I'm dead. I might as well just roll over and make it happen. And it's like, no, I mean, I'm sure my oncologist hates me because I constantly ask why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? Why are we doing, and you don't see any initials after my name. So, I'm sure he's like, hey, idiot, I'm the one with the MD here doing this. No. You just listen to me. But no, I don't want my life to be shaped by the decisions that either I didn't make or that somebody else made for me. I want my life to be shaped by the decisions that I made for myself. So I just don't turn it over to him and say, okay, doc, whatever you think. Now, probably 95% of what he recommends I do, but I always ask why. And I explain it to me, why, and explain it to me on my level, because I don't live on your level. All these big words, I don't understand that. Explain it to me as a human being. And he's good at doing that, but I'm sure he's like, oh God, here he goes again, another question, so.
But hell yeah to that.
Well, and it's something that's said over, and I mean, of how many of our podcasts you've listened to, but when we've interviewed other holistic health practitioners, I mean, we are each individually our the highest level expert on our own body, and that any treatment should be a collaboration and not a I know best, I'm going to do this from necessarily either direction, right? It should be back to the team effort thing, where you have your expertise of your own perceptions and they have the expertise of their medicinal training. So it makes total sense that it makes sense for all of us to be deeply engaged with our healing process, like you obviously are doing for yourself.
It is, and I you can tell I kind of have fun with it in a lot of ways. I think you sort of have to. I mean, I remember I had a resident, a hematoma, which was kind of the precursor to the whole tumor in my ankle. And I had this large hematoma, and it was a Friday afternoon, and the surgeon was gone, and the resident was there. And thank God he was in scrubs. And he's like, I'm going to drain this. And I looked at him, and I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. And he's like, oh, no, I'm going to do that. And he put the needle in, and he drew out a bunch of blood, and he uncapped the needle. He left the needle in, and he uncapped the syringe, and it looked like a geyser. It would look like Old Faithful. It was just blood was skirting everywhere. And I was laughing so hard because I was like, I told you not to do that. And now you're wearing all my blood, and you're going to have to call a housekeeping in to basically sanitize this room because it pretty much looks like a crime scene, but it was just like, listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. But so many, especially young residents, think, well, I've got experience. Like, you don't have anything. You don't know squat. I always tell residents, people, if you want to learn how this job's done, go watch a nurse. Nurses know what that. I never call my doctor when I need something. I always call as a nurse.
Yeah. No, it's true. The nurse, the nursing staff stays in the front lines. They deal with the everyday bullshit that they have to, and the everyday shit, literally, that they have to deal with.
And they actually do so much more treatment, like direct patient care, and listening to patients every day, all day. They get way more time with patients than doctors do.
They do.
It's sad to say.
It is.
But speaking of systems that are flawed. I think I gotta say I was like bursting with all these things I wanted to say while you've been talking for the last little bit of time. I just want to go back a little bit to what you're saying before about embracing the experience, and you feeling like you're not special in the way that you've embracing the pain, and it spoke so much to me about so my brain went two different places. One is about how much of our reality is shaped by our perceptions. And if you decide to embrace something, that's a whole different energy than avoiding something. And it's going to change not just your experience, but potentially not to downplay the pain you've experienced. But I'm imagining that taking on that mentality of embracing the experience is going to change your perception of the pain. I'm actually thinking of Ina May Gaskin. I don't know if you've heard of her. She was big on natural childbirth, and I wrote a seminal work that I can't remember the name of right now, but she was talking about like giving birth around the world. And there's lots of places in the world where women don't experience childbirth as painful at all. They experience it as intense. They experience it as, this really incredibly, certainly life-altering experience, but they don't necessarily feel it as scary pain. And in fact, it's pretty clear that when women end up in hospitals, the pain often gets worse because they're afraid. Right. And so, and that's true of any pain, right? The more afraid we are, the more intense we feel it as pain. So that was the first thing I was thinking about. And then the second thing was actually us as EFT practitioners. One of the techniques we use when someone's suffering from emotional pain is, we tap and ask the person to go ahead and experience the pain, the emotional pain they're feeling. Like that it's witnessing the pain, accepting the pain, giving voice to the pain, like having our body is a voice saying this hurts and I hate it, and I just want you to know that I'm hurting. And there's like the higher self, right, saying, okay, I see you, I'm with you, I see you suffering, and I'm here for you, and it's all going to be okay. And the pain, and for EFT, like the emotional pain someone might be experiencing from some earlier trauma or difficult memory, the pain gets resolved. It goes away because that witnessing happened, and like the body got to say its piece. It got to like the experience sort of played itself out, and then you get to the other side of it. And that must be true. I hadn't thought of it being true of any kind of pain necessarily, potentially, that where if you are being in the pain and letting the pain be what it is, and that sort of witnessing, detached again with the detachment, right? A little detached from the experience of this is what's happening, and I'm going to, and I don't need to just think of it as pain. I can think of it as motivation. I can think of it as passion. I can think of it as, drive to live and drive to experience and drive to explore. It changes everything into something, again, sounds so spiritual. It sounds so, just such a deep way to experience life, by taking the pain and changing it into something so transformative.
Well, at least with pain, like, what popped into my head when you said that was, at least with pain, you're alive. As long as you're hurting, I'm still here, and like I said, my pain is going to go away someday. It's, through whatever means. But if I quit that pain will never go away. At least for me, that's the way I look at it. I can't quit, because that pain then will never go away, because it'll always be in my head, if nowhere else. And that's, again, I think, the control your mind or it will control you. That's, of all those sayings, so a lot of times I think that's probably the most important. You've got to control that, because if you don't, who knows where you're going to end up.
And in fact, so much of suffering is because of letting the pain be in control, letting someone else be in control, and then avoiding all the time. And I'd say that's like that feels like one of the fundamental differences between you and the next person is you're not avoiding, you're embracing. Like that little twist all by itself feels what makes a huge piece of what makes you different from the average Joe, as far as how you're going through this process. Yeah, all this what led to you writing your book then?
In a way, yeah, it was, and again, I wrote this book. It's really kind of a culmination of two stories, and I'll tell you real quick. One was for a former basketball player who had moved to Colorado with her boyfriend, and my wife and I had dinner with her, and I said to her one day, I'm really kind of excited that you're here, and I can kind of watch you find and live your purpose. And she got really quiet, and she looked at me and she said, "Coach, what do you think my purpose is?" I said, "I don't know what your purpose is." I said, "That's what your life should be about, finding that purpose. And then once you find it, go ahead and live it." And then there was another, I had a person reached out to me, a high school or a college person reached out to me on LinkedIn. And he said, "What do you think are the most important things I should know to not only be successful in my job or in business, but in life?" And I didn't want to give them the, get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But in a way, they've been done. They've been done a lot. And I wanted to try to give him something that more resonated in his soul, that kind of got deeper for him. And so I spent some time and I wrote down thoughts and notes. And eventually I had these 10 principles and I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I said, well, I've got a life experience that kind of falls under this principle, or I know somebody whose life, would emulate that principle. And so literally I had my leg amputated in April, and I had chemotherapy, started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs in June. And I sat down at the computer and I started, during that period of time, during that 3 months or whatever, and wrote the book and really kind of built stories underneath it. And I always say I wrote it, but I really feel it was inspired by God. Not that, there's that old Lily Tomlin joke about, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So it really, I never heard, voices, but I kind of felt like God was like, "Hey, dummy, sit down at the computer here and just write what I tell you to write," kind of thing. And I had this book and I didn't know if it was any good. It's the first time I've ever written a book. So I gave it to some friends and I'm like, yes, no, tell me if it's garbage or tell me if it's something that I should try to publish. And they were all like, "No, you need to try to get it published." So that's kind of how it came about. And, I just, most people kind of, when they're healing, sit around, eat bonbons and watch Netflix. I decided to write a book. So it was just, I could heal just as well sitting at the computer as I could in front of the TV. So.
But no, like that answering the call from God or the muse or the universe or whatever it is, the higher entity that connects us all, and then letting it channel through you creation, which would happen with your book and with these principles. That's awesome. Like, so few people answer those calls or even hear them. So that's pretty awesome.
I think
And
it's the hearing. I think there's so much clutter, there's so much garbage, there's so much things going on. And one of the principles I put in the book was about listening. And it was something I learned as a negotiator, not listening to respond to you, but listening to understand what you're saying and why you're saying it. And that was so important as negotiators, because, as a policeman, I'm usually dealing with you face to face. And if I see you balling up your fist, maybe you're going to fight me. Or if I see you looking around, maybe you're looking to run. Well, if I see those things, well, I can do something about it. I can sit you down, I can handcuff you, I can put you in the car, whatever. I can mitigate that. But as a negotiator, I'm trying to figure out what's going on based on what you're saying, what you're not saying, and how you're saying it. And that's a whole subtle kind of art that you don't usually get as a police officer. It's usually just one-on-one or however many people you're dealing with. So you kind of have to, you want to listen to understand where people are coming from. And if we did that to each other, especially today, I think we'd be a whole lot better off.
Oh, I hear you there. Jesus. Yeah. If we just listened a little bit more, good God, the world would be 1,000 times better, just to be like, oh, I shouldn't yell at this person behind the counter because they're honestly having a bad day because something probably terrible happened. So the fact that they gave me 3 sugars instead of 2 sugars, I should let it go,
Right.
Or just ask more nicely. And yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
And I gotta say, I think that your timing for this book is impeccable because I love these principles anyway. I'm looking at them now, and so many of them, people like the ones that stick out to me in regard to what we're going through right now as far as COVID is concerned. You have enjoy your life, and you're born to live an uncommon and extraordinary life. And so many people are like, so it's so easy to get in the habit of, well, I'll enjoy life when this happens, when COVID is over, when I have my vaccination, when I am able to work less hours at my job, when it's always there's always a circumstance we can look at and decide not to enjoy life, and there's always plenty of fodder for that if you want to avoid the enjoyment of life. So until you clearly, from your perspective, if you can write that down, anyone can write that. Anyone can enjoy their life if you can have that as be one of your guiding principles, certainly. And then also that we need circumstances to be a certain way in order to live an uncommon and extraordinary life. And again, can't wait for circumstances. You have to
go live your life. It's not, it's not going to come to you. You've got to go find it. You've got to go experience it. And you grow and you develop by doing things that make you uncomfortable, by doing things that scare you. That's how we grow. If we do and we all know these people, the same thing every day. They get up at the same time, they eat the same breakfast, they go to work, they come home, they sit in front of TV, they go to bed every day. Those people are dead already. They just haven't fallen over yet because they're not growing. And there's so many people out there like that. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be, coming up with quantum physics stuff. You can just read a book instead of watching television. Do something that improves you. And I try to do that every day. I can't tell you the last, well, I can. I watched the news last night, but I don't watch television. I want things that make me better, that, I want to die becoming, die learning, and if I can do that, then yeah, that's good. But so many people, I'm afraid. And I think the one quote that really kind of resonated for me, because I know I've done it a ton, 1,000 times, is, we think with our fears and our insecurities instead of using our minds. I'm afraid to do that. And I always tell young people, especially, if you have a passion in your heart for something and you want to do it, but it scares you, do it. Go ahead and do it. Because when you get to be my age and you get to be the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not the things that you did. They're going to be the things that you didn't do. And by that time, it's too late to go back and do them.
And the other big part of what you're saying of that wisdom is, if that thing you want to do, if it's scaring you, it means it's real. It means that there are true stakes to you. If you're doing something that you think is supposed to be the best thing for your life and you don't have an emotion behind it, you're doing it and it's no different than just picking between vanilla and chocolate, then you're picking the wrong thing. If you're walking into your life with apathy, you're on the wrong path. Because, you know, the fear, the anxiety, that emotional charge, it's signaling either that you're in the right direction or you're going in the dead wrong direction. Like it's your body and your mind and your soul's way of saying, hey, pay attention to this, and be like, is this the right way or the wrong way? And if you're like, I really want to do this, but it scares the ever living shit out of me, it's like, all right, then you go that way, and then you just face the fear, and you will feel so much pride and joy for doing it, even if you fuck up when you get there. Because then at least you can say, you know what, I did that and it didn't work out, but you know what, I don't have regret.
Right.
You know, I don't, yeah, like, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, in the moment, the fear can be so crippling and people run from it. It's very natural to run from fear, but to be able to face it to look it in the face and be like, you know what, like, I'm petrified to do this, but I know that this is calling to me, and to still reach out and grab it.
And I think the opposite is true. You know,
yeah.
If you're doing something and you're like, you know, this is my life's goal, but you get up every morning like, I hate this. You haven't found that purpose.
Yes.
That's not your purpose.
Yes.
You know, and I had that discussion with the player, you know, who was here in Colorado, and you know, and she was like, well, how will I know? I'm like, well, if you get up in the morning and you can't stand to do what you're doing, that's not your passion. But if you get up in the morning, you're like, I can't wait to go do whatever, then that might be what you're supposed to do. You know, and it really can be that simple. It really doesn't. It doesn't have to be real complicated. Are you like, yeah? And I was that way as a cop. You know, I couldn't wait to get out of bed. What are we going to do today? You know, how are we going to go help somebody? How are we going to make a difference? You know, I mean, what exciting, fun, stupid, you know, driving 120 miles an hour in the night down the freeway in the rain. Yeah, not the best decision I ever made as a policeman. So,
but no, I totally hear you with that. Because like with me, I don't think even Stacy knows this. With me, I still have fear before I work with clients. And
good.
It's, you know, yeah. And it's like, you know, am I going to fuck this up? Am I going to help them? You know, am I going to be good enough to help heal them and to walk with them on their journey? But every time after the session, I'm just like, that was amazing. And it's like, they are better after that session than they were before. And I feel honored to have been in that space and for them to have shared such vulnerability with me. And so, like, you're right. Like, it's so
what
funny.
Your fear makes you bring your A game every day.
Yes. It keeps me sharp.
And I always say this to my surgeons and my doc. I'm like, you know what? Better bring your A game today. I always tell them that. I'm like, I'm going to tell you to bring your A game.
It's so true. And it's only been very recently that I've been trying to change my perspective on that and be like, and instead of me saying to myself, I'm scared or anxious, to reframe it as, I'm really excited. Because it's the same goddamn feeling in my body of just being agitated and full of adrenaline and being a little jumpy. It's the same feeling. And just changing that perspective in my brain of like, I'm just excited because I'm really jonesing to do this. Because just like what you were saying with the surgeon, you don't want a surgeon who's going to go in and be like, oh, this is the 50 set. Like, this is like, oh, what am I going to eat for lunch? I don't care what I'm doing. It's like, no, this is my body. You're cutting me open. I want you to be like, all right, this is different. I've never done this before. Let me make sure let me redo some more research. Let me go to the practice lab and practice some more. Like, you want the person to be enough on edge where they give their A game, but not paralyzed with fear where they're going to cripple themselves. Like, it's that balance for sure. Totally agree.
Well, I think we've solved the world's problems today.
Well, Well, it's funny. It's all simple, just not easy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It kind of is simple, but it's not
But,
necessarily easy,
but
but
we're
it's
the
not.
ones who make it hard.
Oh
We're
my
the
God.
idiots that, I mean, it's not some external force that's making it hard. It's us. We're in our heads. And I've been there a million times. I'll probably be there a million more, but now I know how to deal with it.
Right. Right.
No, it dead on. The wisdom of the simplicity of just listening to oneself and then following what you already know is right, what you already know is calling you, what you already know is moral. We know when we're doing something bad. We know when we're doing something that isn't calling to us, that isn't our purpose, and we rationalize it or we ignore it. It's like, I can't give up this great paying job because it's giving me security. It's the fear, oh, what's the big deal if I don't put the carriage back in the carriage receptacle thing? I'll just leave it by the car. Or like, what's the big deal if I found this wallet on the ground and there's an ID in it, I'll just take the money and throw the wallet in the trash. Like, even if no one never knows, and even if believe in God or not, you can ignore it. That you did something wrong, and that's the acid that eats away at you. And it's the same thing if you're not living your purpose in life. The monotony, hang on, hold on, I had a thought and it disappeared for a second. If you're not living your purpose in life, if you're not squeezing the juice out of life, the other parts of life, the unavoidable parts of being a human being, the pain, the suffering, the all of it will cripple you unless you're squeezing the shit out of the juice of life and being like, I can deal with the rest of the shit because this juice is delicious. Like, I'm getting up every day because this is awesome, and I'll deal with being in pain and getting sick and dealing with the heartache, or dealing with traffic, or dealing with stupid politicians, or whatever you want to include, the normal shit we can't avoid. And people who don't have that just see all this shit that is just life, that it would never go away no matter what we do, no matter how much we wish for utopia. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be part of life. The people who don't have that, everything, it just seems like it's miserable, and then they just collapse into themselves, and it's unfortunate. It's so unfortunate.
It's there if you just grab it.
Yes.
It's there if you just grab it. All you got to do is reach out your hand and grab it. And so many people, it's like we were talking, are so afraid. Some people are afraid of being successful, and I talk in a little bit about the book about being successful, and I really kind of think I missed the boat, because I think the better word would have been, and it's another S word, is significance. Because success is what we do. We're successful at what significance is what we do for others. I think you can be both, don't get me wrong, but I really think, in my mind, at this point in my life, it should be more about significance and less about success.
You're dead right. And that contributes to the fear. Because if you say, I'm doing something significant, you're placing your actions on this higher tier of pedestal of scrutiny, of power in your life and of influence. And that is frightening. Just like being a parent, you have significance over the children you've brought into this world or that you've adopted, and you're molding them, and that can be scary as hell. You're both of you are parents, and both of you, I'm sure, have had those moments of like, what the hell am I doing with this kid? Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with this kid. And so
multiple times a day. Yeah.
Yeah, when the doctor was like, it's a girl. I'm like, no, I have brothers. No, you leave it in until it's done, because I don't know what to do with a girl. Now I have a tomboy, so
I leave it in until it's done. I love that. I love that. Oh, that's so funny. Oh my God.
Gosh. This has been so wonderful to talk to you, Terry. Do you have any final, well, first of all, where can people find you if they'd like to find your book, find your website?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is I have a blog. It's called Motivational Check. So motivationalcheck.com. You can leave me a comment. You can get access to the book. You can get to my social media accounts. So motivationalcheck.com.
Great. And do you have any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with? The last words of wisdom?
I always try to leave people with something positive. So I ask people to do me a favor, especially when I speak. So for the next 30 days, everybody you come in contact with, assume that they're going to be dead tomorrow. So the person who, who cuts you off in traffic, or who takes credit for your work that you did at your office, or, your 16-year-old who's driving you absolutely up the wall, imagine that they will be dead tomorrow. Because if you do that, you'll have a whole lot less stress in your life, and you'll also have a much greater appreciation for the people around you. And I'll leave it at that.
Oh my goodness.
That's
Amazing.
awesome.
Amazing practice. Yes.
Yes.
This has been so inspirational. I can't thank you enough for being with us here today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's people like you that hopefully our conversation will make a difference in somebody out there. And, we'll never know who that person is, but that's got to be a good feeling. It is for me.
Good.
Absolutely.
Tossing out the seeds. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
so much. And till next time.